Hello, folks. Tara here with the Wifey Wake Up No Makeup podcast. And today we have another response video. And this one will probably apply more to my brothers. Now, I want to be clear that I don't think it's my role to be teaching men. However, what I'm going to do is in this response video, I'm going to share from my experience, a very personal experience that applies directly to this video. So here we go. This is Jocko Willink. You guys, many of you probably know who he is, but he's a former Navy SEAL in an important, renowned figure in the leadership space. Here we go.
This is the Jocko Underground podcast, number 149. Sitting here with Echo Charles, we have some interesting and important questions from the troopers today, opening up with a little bit of a doozy.
A little bit.
Let's rock and roll.
Okay. All right, first question. Thank you for everything you do. The positive impact on my life for the last 8 years is immeasurable. I'm 32-year-old male and have been with my girlfriend for 3 years. The first year and a half was amazing, and I thought for sure she was the girl I was going to marry. She's beautiful, driven, loyal, and we share so many important values. I knew she had mental health issues in the past, including bipolar and borderline personality disorder tendencies and self-harm. It seems she was keeping all of that under control with regular therapy and coping mechanisms that she had learned. She was functional, successful, sweet, intelligent, and loving person. A year and a half ago, she moved in with me and things began to change. She stopped going to therapy because life got quote unquote too busy. And she was doing so well. Her mental health issues began resurfacing and have escalated ever since. She is often still all the things I fell in love with her for. But now, almost weekly, she has a mental breakdown where she is unhappy with everything in her life, including me. She sometimes screams at me, tells me she's done with me, and insults me. I try to take ownership and attempt to do what I can to make her feel better. Later, she apologizes, feels guilty, calls herself crazy, tells me I'm the most understanding, best guy ever, and can't wait for me to propose to her. I usually forgive her quickly, but then it happens again. She thinks that if I propose, she will feel more secure and stop this pattern. But she also says she has always been like this and always will. But I can't accept that because she wasn't for the first year and a half. I've tried getting her back into therapy, both individually and as a couple. Both therapists upset her and she quit. They made her feel worse about herself and like they were ganging up on her, quote unquote. I don't want to give up on her, but I can't live the rest of my life with someone yelling and insulting me. I'm not perfect, but I remain kind to her and do not yell back at her. And I try to make changes to help the things she says she's unhappy with. What do you guys think?
You're right. You can't live the rest of your life with a person yelling and insulting you. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. You can. But it's going to be miserable.
I'm going to cut it off there. I'm going to put the link to this in the show notes because I highly encourage you to listen to Jocko's response. I totally agree with what he has to say. And what I'm going to share is actually from the perspective of a child, an adult child now, of course, of someone who is borderline personality and the absolute misery it causes in your life growing up. And especially once you realize, maybe not once you realize, it just happened to be for me, the proverbial SHIT hit the fan one day. So a little bit of background. You got the question. It was worth, you got to hear the details. I think one key detail also is when she said that she doesn't like what the counselors have to say. That is, if a borderline goes to counseling, I mean, that's a miracle, first of all. If they stay in counseling, that is the second miracle because they do not like hearing the feedback, but that is what is essential, of course. So my experience, when shortly after I married my husband, well, actually in the process of marrying my husband, the way I now see what happened is the problems that were in my parents' relationship were externalized. So I became the literal scapegoat. If you don't know the literal meaning of a scapegoat, highly recommend checking it out, looking into it. But real quick summary is it's a thousands and thousands year old way of being. People have been doing this for thousands of years. It used to be that when people perceived that there was a demon within the tribe or the family, they would put the demon on the goat or whatever animal it was, and then send it off the cliff. And voila, the demon is no longer in the family. Well, it turns into this more literal sense of a scapegoat being an actual person. That's where we get the term. And so I became the scapegoat. What was the problem that was between my parents was externalized on me, and I was pushed out of the family, literally disowned by my mother saying, "You are dead to me." There's lots of details in between, but that should get you all caught up that this is not a healthy situation. And what happened is I was the oldest child, and usually the certain responsibilities are automatically put on the first child of the family. And so why am I saying all of this? I carried a lot of the shame and the guilt about what happened because I took on the responsibility of actually what my parents hadn't taken care of. And that was, to put it quite bluntly, my mother's horrific behavior and my dad putting up with it. And the question the reason I'm bringing this up is that if a person is considering being with a borderline person, first of all, if you're dating anyone, you should absolutely consider, this is straight from my husband, who has lots before me, had very significant dating and marriage experience, actually had a child out of wedlock, and learned from that point on that he wasn't going to date someone who wasn't qualified to be the mother of his children, and made that a hard and fast rule. He actually went as far as getting a vasectomy. I highly do not recommend that, because when we wanted to have children, that worked against us. So I do not recommend that as a means, because you might change your mind someday, and it is actually very, very it's a very emotional thing. I can't even come up with a word for it. It was a horrific thing in my life to have a dream that I saw as part of my future not come to fruition. So I do not recommend the vasectomies, even though they say they're reversible. So going back to having a borderline personality mother, and really a very narcissistic parental situation, is that as the first child, I learned to take on those responsibilities, the responsibilities of the emotions for the situations, for the adults in my life. I learned to take that upon myself. And growing up, then I did not have clear discernment about those types of healthy or unhealthy boundaries of emotions. And so my plea is to you, in sharing this with you, if you're considering being in a relationship with someone with borderline personality, which is more common among women, but it can also show up similarly in men who are very narcissistic. Now, that term is thrown around copiously these days. So I would encourage you not to just throw that around, but really discern, is someone truly narcissistic, which can show up in various covert ways also. There's literally covert narcissism. There's the vulnerable narcissist. So to be discerning and not just throwing the term around, but it can be very destructive if you're just like, no, I'm absolutely in love with this person, I'm going to marry them no matter what. Consider your future children, because if you're going to overlook that for yourself, it is absolutely horrific to be a child of a borderline personality whose that borderline personality you end up attracting the codependent counterpart who will allow that and okay that behavior, and then it over time becomes worse and worse, and it's allowed around the children. That's what happened in my growing up experience. And it's not uncommon that it escalates into absolutely horrific experiences, like for me, without naming all the incidences. And believe me, I'm not trying to rake my parents over the coals. At this point, I've come to a point in my life that this is not about getting back at them. This is really about helping other people. And this is not at all about a vendetta for them. I really want to help prevent this in a future situation. You cannot control if this borderline personality is going to have kids of her own somewhere else, but at least you do not have to be wrapped up in it for the rest of your life. It's not just as long as you're married or until the kids are 18. It's literally then the rest of your life. And just to put it very straightforward, what it was like for me at that point in time, And for years afterwards, when my mother said, "You are dead to me," in exact words, and emphasized it in other ways, mind you, it was as if the rug of my total foundation of life was pulled out from under me. And thankfully, I was already into my marriage, married into a wonderful family, and had their love and support and their reasoning to help me understand, like, that is not right. That is not how parents should treat their child, whether adult or child. And it was absolutely devastating. And I had to rebuild myself from that foundation. Now, the blessing was that I was able to rebuild my foundation from a healthier standpoint, in my opinion, and am, I believe, much more balanced, understand so much more in life these days, and emotions, relationships, and so forth, because I had to rebuild. But I just felt really compelled to respond to this video and encourage you also to listen to Jocko's response, that is not just about you. Hopefully, as you're dating, you are, or even sleeping with someone, you're considering first and foremost, would this person make a good mother? Because how often that happens, it's very often, right? And so that should be first and foremost in vetting someone to be in your life and the life of your future kids, because that is the likelihood. So next, I was really fortunate. Maybe a side note to this is, even though my husband could see clearly at the time when he met my family of origin that my mother was like that, fortunately, he did not automatically rule me out. Now, I think, like I said in an earlier podcast about dating and marrying older men, he had already had enough life experience to go, oh, I know this type of person and I know how to handle this. If you're with someone that's your contemporary, women who are watching this, I think that's a huge advantage to dating and marrying someone who's several years older than you. My husband's 12 years older than me. And so fortunately, he had enough life experience and confidence at that point that he wasn't going to rule out me, someone he saw as then we weren't engaged, but he saw me as thankfully, a viable candidate for the future mother of his children. And that he didn't just rule me out because of what he saw in my mother, that he would discern, has that apple fallen more directly from that tree, or has she rolled away? And fortunately, I had already on my own been rolling away, and thankfully, in hindsight, was really cut off from those branches. In hindsight, it was devastating, not to diminish that actual time and period in life. So also, absolutely watch a person's, whether they're admittedly BPD or narcissistic or not. It's always imperative to watch someone's actions rather than just listening to their words. And again, I'm borderlining on giving advice at this point to my brothers out there. But I hope that by me sharing this life experience, I could share so much more. But I also don't want to verge on the side of being scandalous in trying to, again, rake my parents over the coals. These are just things that really happened. And at a certain point, I think it's very cut and dry. You might feel sorry for someone and be like, I don't want to cut this off with them. That will hurt their feelings. But it's like when my husband and I were teaching self-defense classes to women, we would say, you can't feel bad enough for that other person to make them not do bad things. Okay, so what I mean is we would teach women to walk to the other side of the street if you felt something in your gut that person approaching you was not safe. You have to care more about, yes, your well-being, and that is okay to do. If you don't think it's okay to do, by the way, that is a cue that you grew up in one of these environments. You have to care about your own well-being. And if you can't even go there, yes, you absolutely have to think about the future children who may suffer the consequences of this person. Don't be afraid to go across to the other side of the street in the self-defense realm. And don't be afraid to cut it off with a person who, this type of person will pull out all stops. They will do anything to hurt you. And that is not an understatement. That is from personal experience. You have to be super on guard. And I would advise not to be involved with a borderline personality person at all. I hope that hits home where it's meant to. I love you guys. I want the best relationships for you and for particularly for the future children. They are, yeah, so such the aphorism, right? They are our future, but they really are. And when you've experienced and you've seen pain in this world, you do not want it to continue. And I do not want it to continue for you or your potential future children. So thank you for listening this far. Make sure to like, subscribe, and absolutely share this with someone that you think it could be helpful for, someone who came to mind. And I'll see you in the next episode. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.